Welcome to Talking Beat, the podcast for the Portland Police Bureau. We're focusing on thoughtful conversations that we hope will inform and provide you with a small glimpse of the work performed by Portland police officers, as well as issues affecting public safety in our city. Here's what's on today's show.
The main message is to be involved. The police department can't resolve all issues. We are facing a severe staffing shortage, likely not to get better, and so we are going to be stretched thin. I think the community needs to stay engaged and stay involved and know that we need their help.
This episode of The Talking Beat is brought to you by... Through the good work of the Portland Police Sunshine Division, officers are able to bring emergency food to people 24/7. Sunshine Division also operates 2 warehouses where community members in need can access free food and clothing. Learn more at sunshinedivision.org. Now, on to the show.
Today we're talking to our precinct commanders. Portland has 3 precincts, Central, East, and North Precinct. They're going to provide us some insights into what is going on in each of their precincts and some of the creative strategies they're using to address those crimes. Commander Mike Krantz oversees Central Precinct. Let's talk about your precinct and what the boundaries are and what makes your precinct different from the others.
Well, Central Precinct is the downtown precinct known as by a lot of folks, but reality is that we cover a lot of lower southeast. We have the general boundaries of, if we go on the southeast side, Milwaukee, all the way north to I-84, all the way up to the east end of 39th. So it's a large lower southeast area, a lot of neighborhoods in there, and it's unique from the west side that we cover down to Washington County line or Tigard, and west all the way out to the Washington County boundaries or the city of Beaverton, and then as far north on the west side of the river up to up Highway 30 towards St. John's Bridge. So we have a pretty large area that's got a lot of unique neighborhoods, industrial, business, downtown core. Central Precinct is an area that's often the protest or demonstration area more than other geographical areas in the city. We have the business core in Central Precinct, as well as also challenged by a dense homeless population that is impactful to a lot of the businesses, community members, and also has challenges among itself with addiction and mental health on the streets. So there's a lot of challenges for calls for service that relate to those specific circumstances.
And you also have the entertainment district.
And we have the entertainment district.
That's a lot of people coming into a dense area and then leaving.
Yeah, so typically Friday and Saturday nights are the busiest. We have between 10 and 20,000 visitors a weekend in the small area of Everett to Burnside and 2nd to 4th. High concentration of alcohol establishment outlets. And we have a dedicated team of 6 officers and 1 sergeant for that amount of visitors. So there's a lot of alcohol outlet down there, a lot of alcohol-influenced folks frequently. We have substantial calls for service down there during those times, often fueled by alcohol or just some folks decide to get in assaultive behavior and a lot of fights. So it's a big job for that small team to try and manage that area. It's also an opportunity for a lot of the community and a lot of visitors to come down and enjoy the nightlife of the city. So it's a challenge there to keep it viable, but also keep it safe and handle the problems.
Commander Wendy Steinbraun oversees North Precinct. Let's talk about your precinct and what the boundaries are and tell me a little bit about it.
Well, North Precinct moved into a new building several years ago at Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard and Killingsworth Street. So longtime Portlanders will remember the original North Precinct, which is up on North Philadelphia Avenue. And that currently houses our traffic division. So there are no patrol officers that report out of there, but we're all at the 449 Northeast Emerson Street building. That is a community policing center, so we also house the Tactical Operations Division and Youth Services Division. North Precinct is about 58 square miles. The northern boundary is the Columbia River, and we go west to the Willamette with the exception of Highway 30 in the Germantown area. We do cross the St. John's Bridge and patrol that area. And then we go south where it meets into Interstate 84, and that's the boundary between us and East Precinct. And then we go east out to Northeast 162nd when you start to get into Gresham. So what makes North Precinct unique is that we have the Lloyd District, which includes the Lloyd Center Mall, Moda Center, the Convention Center. We also have the Memorial Coliseum in our jurisdiction boundaries, and the airport to the north. Now, the airport is patrolled by airport police. They have their own police department, but we do interact and help out with them in that area as well.
And we also have Commander Tasha Hager here today. She oversees East Precinct. Let's talk about East boundaries and tell me a little bit about your precinct.
So East Precinct covers the newest area of Portland. A large part of it used to be unincorporated Multnomah County, and that was taken in by the city of Portland many years ago. The geographic boundaries to the south, we border Clackamas County. To the west, we border Central Precinct at 39th or Cesar Chavez Boulevard. To the east, we touch Gresham. And then to the north, we border North Precinct mostly along the I-84 freeway, with the exception of Rocky Butte, some of the Rocky Butte area, which is East Precinct. I would say, for the most part, East is highly residential. We do have some businesses, some shopping areas like Mall 205 and Gateway, but it is a largely residential neighborhood, very diverse. East Precinct has a large number of different immigrant populations that have moved there. It is a very diverse neighborhood.
So all of you have really different precincts, but you face some of the same crime trends as well as some different ones. So talk to me about what's going on in your precinct, what's trending upward.
Well, at North Precinct, the number one property crime issue is auto theft. And we've been doing directed specific missions towards reducing auto theft for about 6 months now. And our current numbers show that our auto theft is down about 4%. And we are just starting to hit the tip of the iceberg, if you will, on the longer-term investigations, where we've identified individuals that seem to do this for a living. They steal lots of cars, and they seem to be hanging out in one specific geographic area. And so we use data to kind of pinpoint that, and that's where we focus our efforts and resources on. Now that spring break has come and gone, we have the speed racers back in town. They definitely tend to be seasonal. They start up around March and they'll go through July, early September. What we're seeing a lot more of the last couple of years is the so-called sideshows, and those come up from Northern California. And these folks like to come up, they'll take over a freeway or a bridge overpass, and they'll do their sideshow, which includes drifting. If you've ever seen Fast and the Furious, I think these folks are trying to emulate that, and they like to put it on YouTube and post it and get a lot of people interested in what they're doing. The one thing that I will say about that, and it's not kids, so a lot of people say, oh, it's just the teenagers out having fun. It's not. It's older adults. They spend a lot of time building their cars, and they want to go out and show them off. But obviously the city streets and freeways and overpasses are not the location to do it. It's not safe. And last year we did have a speed racing related fatality along Marine Drive, and we'd like to avoid that in the future.
And what are the challenges that you face trying to address that?
Well, some of the challenges is there's a lot of them in one spot at one time. And so we'll have a mission going where we'll have a team of officers that go out. And once they learn that they're gathering in one spot, they'll go to that area. And then when you have 20 plus cars and they all take off in different directions, that can be hard to stop and identify who's doing this. But we do use photo radar, especially in key spots where we know that they're going to open it up and increase their speed. We also use our air support unit that can help us identify cars that are driving in a reckless manner, and then we can follow them and stop them later on. And then people are coming from outside in, so it's not just Portlanders that are doing this. We have people come down from the state of Washington as far away as Tacoma, and as I previously mentioned, the sideshow enthusiasts that come up from the Bay Area, specifically Oakland and San Francisco and the surrounding areas.
So at Central Precinct, we have some unique challenges specific to the geographical area. We have... when I came into Central Precinct, looking at data and looking forward on where we should be putting resources at, we really noticed a couple things that were pretty pretty obvious in the data, specifically around assaults and the feeling of safety around the community specific to these assaults. Second Burnside on the west side has been consistently, over the last year at least, an area where assaults and assaults with edged weapons, so knife assaults, have been the highest in the city, and in trade, I would suspect highest in the state, just because we have the most population in the state. So that became an area where we really needed to concentrate a lot of resources to reduce the violence, specifically around assaults and edged weapon assaults over the last 6 months. Along with that, we had another opportunity to address open-air drug use and drug traffic in an area around North Old Town is what we refer to it as, somewhere around 6 to Broadway, Irving, Hoyt area, and the really prolific open-air drug trafficking that's going on. And so for the last 6 months, we've been concentrating on reducing that and as well as addressing violent behavior at Second Burnside, and really about 4 blocks in all directions from that center. Over the last 6 months, we've made a pretty drastic impact on the reduction of assaults. There was a high of about 42 assaults a month in that area at Second Burnside. We've reduced that down all the way to a low of 12 at one point, and in the month of January, we had 0 aggravated assaults. So we've made a big impact. What that does, though, is draw quite a bit of number of resources and assets from our patrol division to do that work. So as well as detectives on follow-up and a lot of support services. We couple enforcement with a lot of service providers, so our behavioral health unit, our service coordination team, as well as some of our partners from service agencies that assist us to really work in an area prior to any enforcement and work it by offering services, by trying to reconnect people to services that they've had before, counselors, and then they've fallen out of programs. So getting people back into programs and off the street or out of the cycle of violence, drug use, or drug dealing, which really impacts a lot of the overall feeling of safety by a lot of people, both that are involved in homelessness or that are involved in addiction and they're on the street, as well as community members who live in the area, or businesses that either own or operate, or employees. So there really is an impact overall by a lot of people that feel that when violence occurs in an area, it makes them feel unsafe. So it really is important that we try and do as much as we can for an overall feeling of safety.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, Mike, I've heard from a lot of people that they're frightened to come downtown. They may have the perception that there's more crime downtown. And I'm sure you hear that a lot. What do you say to those people?
I do, and I go to a lot of community meetings and business meetings and hear the same complaints that the residents or business members don't feel safe. And from stories they've heard, which frequently the stories kind of perpetuate a problem that maybe didn't necessarily occur to them, but they've heard through friends or they've heard through media, and that makes them feel more unsafe because their story's out there. When I talk to community members, I think it's important to get the true numbers out and really talk to people about areas that they work in or they live in and the true numbers around that, so they can understand and have a better understanding how to access that data themselves, so they can see trends that go up and down, and using the open data portal on the Police Bureau's website to really see specific data for their neighborhoods and to have a better understanding, to be informed and educated about what actual crime trends are occurring in Central Precinct. A lot of it is being specific to the actual problem and where the problems and crime is happening, and really specific to understanding that a lot of the crime isn't stranger on stranger necessarily. There's certainly a piece of that is occurring, and I really talk to folks a lot about being aware of the situation, being aware of being vulnerable if they're leaving things in their car for car theft, if they're carrying items and not paying attention to what's going on around them. It's definitely some personal responsibility that needs to be taken on understanding that there are people out there who do intend to do harm to people, and to be aware of that and to be cautious and travel not alone if they can help it. But it is important to understand that people have some personal responsibility they have to take in a big city. But ultimately, we don't want to cause overreaction of fear when it really isn't based on truth. So there is crime, there is crimes of violence, but in reality, in the city this big, I think we're like the 18th largest city, metro area, our crime is fairly low. And it's important to keep that in perspective, is what I tell a lot of community groups that I talk with.
So for East Precinct, I would say, we experience some of the same crimes as the other precincts. And, in the police bureau, we've made significant efforts to really kind of look at our crime data and make data-based decisions. And I think that's important. I mean, for East, really, we've been looking at the level of crime around our public spaces in the Gateway area and Mall 205. And Commander Krantz was talking about public perception and the impact of public perception. And part of the process that we used was to go out and actually do a survey of our community members that work in that area just to see what their perceptions were. And so I think that's an important piece of what we do is not only try to actually have an impact on crime numbers, but also have an impact on people's perceptions of safety, which isn't always, their perceptions aren't always accurate. Sometimes stories or things happen that create a heightened level of fear that's not necessarily something that we want to see with our community. I think the other thing in East Precinct that we're really looking at is what numbers or what is our data not catching. And for East Precinct, really that's looking at many of our immigrant communities who, are coming here from countries where the police are not there to help, are part of the problem, and they're very afraid of law enforcement to begin with. So some of these communities are being victimized, but they're not reporting it to the police. So trying to bridge that gap with some of the communities in East Precinct is something we've been working on. Specifically, in this last 3 to 4 months, we had a couple of people who created, I would say, a little crime wave in our Asian community in grabbing purses from women who are leaving grocery stores or other shopping places. And, that created a level of fear in that community because word spread very quickly that was happening. And so the fact that we were able to go in and meet with different community groups, meet with some of their business leaders, develop a relationship, have a conversation, and most importantly, actually identify who was doing that and arrest them. So we were able to stop that from continuing to happen. And East Precinct has quite a few shootings. So, we work with the gun violence reduction team to try to address that issue too.
When people think of precincts, I think often they think of just officers answering 911 calls. But you all have some specialized teams. You all have neighborhood response teams that work on more preventative things or missions. Tell me about some of the teams that you have.
Well, North has a neighborhood response team that consists of a sergeant and 5 officers, and they do not respond to radio calls. They work on the longer-term neighborhood livability, like nuisance properties or the drug house on the corner that the neighbors are calling about. As far as the auto theft goes, one area that we've been very successful in is that the community members assisted us with. They noticed that there was one particular location where a lot of different cars kept showing up. And then once they took video of it for us, and then once we surveilled that area for a while, we realized that that's where a lot of the stolen cars were going to, and we're recovering them from that area. And so we're working on a longer term investigation on identifying and arresting those people. So the community's help is really key in the neighborhood response team's effectiveness, as well as working on some of our larger crime problems. They also work on organized retail theft. And so I mentioned Lloyd Center Mall earlier. We also have the Jansen Beach and Cascade Station, which both house many different retailers. And we do have a problem with these organized theft rings that go through and steal things and run away. And we use the NERT team to focus on those retailers that are experiencing a lot of loss and identifying that core group of people that seem to engage in this for a living and hold them accountable as well.
At Central Precinct, we have a couple units specific to Central Precinct, and then we also house some units that are bureau-wide in service. So we have the neighborhood response team with 7 officers and a sergeant, and they're responsible for specifically follow-up to criminal activity that's affected a neighborhood. So if we have similar to the other two precincts where there's a complaint of criminal activity specific to a house that is just a long-term problem. They're free to serve those problems. They also do specifically a lot of work in the homeless community. We have 2 homeless outreach officers specifically assigned to NERT to do that work. We also have a street crimes unit made up between 4 officers and a sergeant from Central and 2 officers from North Precinct, and they jointly work on problems that are more of a criminal nature, that occur in afternoon shift hours is where they work. So criminal nature specific to street crime type activities. So open air drug sales. They work in a robbery case right now specific to the activity in both precincts. We also have a Portland Patrol Incorporated bicycle team. So there's 6 officers dedicated to working the contract area of Portland Patrol Inc., which is primarily the downtown core and Old Town, made up of about 5,000 different businesses in the area. But they specifically patrol on bicycles in the downtown core. So they're not responsible for radio calls, but they are responsible for proactive and engagement work in the downtown area. We have an entertainment district detail at night. It's 6 officers and a sergeant. They work 8 p.m. to about 4 a.m., and then they adjust their shift depending on what's going on for events. But they really work just in the area that's designated as the entertainment district. And we have the behavioral health unit, the service coordination team that is assigned to Central Precinct, but they're a bureau-wide resource for call follow-up on behavioral health or mental health issues, as well as the service coordination team, which is really used as a diversion to law enforcement.
So East Precinct has a neighborhood response team, which is currently 1 sergeant and 6 officers. It has historically actually worked on vacant houses, which became a huge issue during the housing crisis crash. And as houses became vacant, they didn't stay vacant. They became occupied by people who didn't own them or rent them or were supposed to be there. So that created some issues. The neighborhood response teams in Portland have historically been about neighborhood livability issues. So really working with neighborhoods in different parts of the city to address livability issues that aren't always criminal issues. So one of those things really that's hugely impactful in our neighborhoods in East, as in the other precincts, is the houseless issue. And not necessarily the people, it's the stuff. So neighbors come out and one week there's 1 tent and then the next week there's 3 tents. And before they know it, they have a small encampment of 20 to 30 people and tarps and garbage and needles and all sorts of things that I won't mention on the podcast. But that's what the NERT team at East is really going to be focused on, is trying to address that. And then we just started a street crimes unit. That's 1 sergeant and 4 officers. And really the street crimes unit will be dealing with some of the criminal issues. One of the things that came out in our survey was that the perception of what is driving some of the crime, and I think this is not just perception, but reality. What's driving the crime in East Precinct is drug-related. So really addressing drug-related crimes or issues, trying to figure out who's selling, where they're selling, and dealing with that particular issue, which is pretty large citywide. It's not something that's easy just to make one arrest and solve the issue.
How do you guys cross over and how do you work together?
Well, at North Precinct, as Commander Krantz mentioned, we have 2 officers with the street crimes unit. Typically, they'll work in an area where it's got the hot spot, and it may be in North Precinct one day, it may be over in Central the other day, in the downtown core area or in the Lower East Side. So we share resources that way. We have the opportunity to use specialty units such as air support and the traffic division, and they will go to any precinct to help us with our missions. And so we combine resources and share resources that way. We also obviously make use of the behavioral health unit quite a bit to help us with calls. Also, we have a cadre of officers that are trained in the enhanced crisis intervention, if you will. We have them available to go out on calls where someone may be experiencing problems with mental illness. They may be at a crisis point where we can go out and we have a specially trained officer that can talk to them and de-escalate the situation.
The one thing that I really enjoy as being a commander right now, Central Precinct, is relationship with the other two commanders. We have the opportunity to where maybe it's not always like this, but really we just call when we need something, and we share resources pretty easily. And I think that's something bureau-wide that we're getting really good at. And it really is because we're at a point of where we need the help from everyone else. We can no longer be siloed and specialized in the roles that we're doing because of our resources bureau-wide are so low. So every time we have a retirement boom and we lose more officers and resources, it's even more important that we all work together to solve problems. And it's a real good working relationship internally among all the divisions right now, really, of just sharing resources and not being siloed in just the special tasks and skills that you have, but using those bureau-wide. And it's important to be able to share those.
And you mentioned data. Are we getting better at looking at the data and analyzing it and trying to pinpoint where things are happening?
I think we have gotten much, much better just in the last year and a half, I'd say, bureau-wide, in using data to be specific about what resources we're putting where. So evidence-led or data-led policing is, 21st century policing, and we are getting very good at it. Not only are we internally using data better, and we have better resources for us to be able to look at it, understand it, and then utilize it, we've also done substantial work on the public side. So the community has an opportunity, unlike most police departments. I would say if they look at our open data site, the community will see that we are leading in the nation as far as the amount of data that we are transparent with, that we provide, that we have out there, multiple different platforms for people to use. And if people want to be informed about what's going on in their city and the police and crime stats, it is a great place to go.
So what is the message you want to tell people? If you're at a community meeting and you get the microphone for a few minutes, what's your main message?
I would say the main message is to be involved. The police department can't resolve all issues. Like Commander Krantz was talking about, we are facing a severe staffing shortage that's likely not to get better. And so we are going to be stretched thin. We are working really well together. I have to reiterate that the relationship piece, especially among the commanders, to really share resources and address issues that are having an impact on all of us, is going to be paramount moving forward. But I think the community needs to stay engaged and stay involved and know that we need their help. We aren't going to be able to do it for them. Sometimes in the past, I think that we have just taken up that mantle and resolved the issue. But I think moving forward, we need them to be involved.
So at North, we have a quarterly meeting, our Public Safety Action Committee meeting. And so we bring a lot of partners to that. So it's not just police that are answering questions, because many of the complaints I get, it's not something the police can serve. If we get a parking complaint, then that should go to parking patrol. If we get a complaint about a large encampment, I would really encourage people to go to portlandoregon.gov's website, and there's a section for one point of contact. That's where you can report homeless encampments or encampments that seem to have disorder and criminal activity around them. And that office is who is really responsible for posting the camps and doing the outreach and to the people that live there and offering them an alternative, and then eventually cleaning it up if it becomes too large. I also get questions about, well, what can we do as a community? And what I would encourage people to do is get to know your neighbors. The police, when you call the police, what you're going to get is usually we're coming to restore order, investigate a crime, and if we determine that a crime has been committed and the people are still there or we can locate them, we will arrest them and they will go to jail. And not all issues that arise in a neighborhood need police response. I'd also like to direct people to our website, portlandpolice.com, because we have online reporting, and many people aren't aware of it. It's free. There's certain crimes that you can't report on there. Anything where there's suspect information or it's a very serious crime. Obviously, we don't want you to report an assault on there because we'd like to do some more investigation on that. But this is a way for community members to say their car gets broken into. There's no suspect information. there's no evidence that an officer needs to come and pick up, but they do want to report the crime, and they should, because that helps us in our data-driven policing, pinpointing where the crimes are actually occurring. So we do want people to make a report. So you can go to that site, and it'll walk you through how to make an online report. The advantages are you'll get a reference number right away, and once a police officer reviews what you've submitted, they will email you a copy of the report with the actual police case number. So that's a convenient way of reporting crime if there's nothing for the officer to follow up on in that moment and it meets a certain criteria, which you can see on the website. Also, you can still make a report to non-emergency, and we have a telephone reporting unit that can take some of these calls over the phone. And again, it would be something where there's no suspect information, there's no leads to follow up on, there's no evidence to be picked up, but it needs to be reported. So I would encourage people to use those platforms. And the non-emergency number is 503-823-3333, and you'll listen to a voice message, and I believe it's you press 2 if you want to talk with a law enforcement officer, and they'll triage the call from there.
So for Central Precinct, a couple of things that I really hit on at community meetings. I go to a lot of community meetings and like I said, business meetings, and listen to a lot of people's concerns and complaints around what they believe is police responsibility. But I think the biggest thing is understand that public service, criminal justice system, service providers is one big wheel with a lot of spokes. And there's a lot of belief out there that the police should be doing something, or they shouldn't be doing something, or they should solve this problem, or they shouldn't solve that problem. But the reality is that I think a basic understanding around what police do and what our primary function is. We're one spoke in that big wheel. We are the only spoke in that wheel that deals with law enforcement. And it's really important to understand that when we show up, we understand that people believe we are the government when we show up, because we are the people, we are the face of government. When an officer shows up, someone calls for help, we're the face of government. But the reality is there's a lot of government behind us that does a lot of jobs that isn't our responsibility or role. And then there's no one else that does our job. So understanding that we have a role to fill, and it's law enforcement, it's holding people accountable for criminal behavior. We do a lot of around that. We do a lot of diversion. We do a lot of service providers. We do a lot of referrals. We get really good at solving problems with other resources. But understanding that there's a much bigger picture behind what we do is critical for the community as a whole to know. I use that because there's a lot of folks who, for instance, think that downtown the police deal with homeless issues. We've criminalized homeless issues somehow, or we arrest people for being homeless, and that's just a huge false narrative. So for folks to really understand the bigger picture is that, and I'll take homeless specifically because that is something I deal with a lot downtown, a lot of concerns, is that we really have completely backed out of the responsibility of taking on homeless issues per se for entrenched encampments and activity around someone sleeping on a sidewalk. There is nothing that we enforce about that. There's no criminality to that specifically of being homeless, and it's important to understand that. What we do is stand by for the HUCKERT program, which is the Housing, Urban, Camping, Impact Reduction Program out of the Office of OMF, supported by the Mayor's Office. And we stand by for security when they request it. Again, we don't participate in cleanup of camps. We don't participate in any enforcement around sleeping or homelessness specific. We do address criminal activity or open drug use or sales or assaults or weapons or anything else that's specific to crime that we are expected to, and that we are the only agency that does provide that service. So simply understanding the much bigger role that police have around law enforcement, and that there's so much other government services out there that provide a lot of the other work that people think we do or should be doing, is really just a basic understanding that I would really like to get across to the community. We are pretty limited in what we actually do out there. Although we are the face of government when we show up, we're not the solution to everything.
Well, we always end every show with the most important question. We embrace our stereotypes here at the Portland Police Bureau. So, what's your favorite donut?
Ooh.
Wendy?
Maple bar.
Okay.
Oh,
Tasha?
sorry, I interrupted.
She was excited about getting the donut out of me.
Although I could go with an apple fritter too, but I'll stick to a maple bar.
So I do like maple bars when I eat them. I'm trying to avoid them because, gotta stay fit and trim.
It's kind of a tough question. There's a lot of very good donut shops here in Portland, and a lot of really really specialties. But I'd like to go plain and just stay with the Maple Bar.
Maple bars all around. Thanks, Commanders.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Want a rewarding career? Consider joining us and becoming a Portland police officer. We have a competitive starting wage and bonuses. We provide an opportunity to advance your career and work in a variety of specialty units. Visit joinportlandpolice.com for more information. Now it's time for Tough Questions, our segment where we answer your toughest questions regarding policing or public safety.
Today's question is, why does it take so long for police to show up on some calls? This is a complaint we see quite often, is people are frustrated with how long they have to wait for a police officer to come take a report when they've called 911. When a person calls 911, the Bureau of Emergency Communications, or BOEC, takes the call information and prioritizes them based on the type of information given to the call taker. Emergencies take the highest priority, where other calls, such as a car prowl with no suspect information, would fall much further down the priority list. Sometimes, because of a number of different calls coming in, call times will get longer for people waiting because officers are tied up doing other police work. In some circumstances, calls require more than one officer to respond, and there may not be more than one officer available. So we have to balance the variety of calls that come in with the number of officers we have working at any given time. A lot of that leads to frustration, and we understand people can get upset when they're waiting for an officer to come take a report from them. One thing we do encourage people to do is to become familiar with our online reporting to see if the type of call they're reporting would be able to be filed online. You can report a crime online by visiting our website, portlandpolice.com.
Thanks for listening to The Talking Beat. Do you have a question for us? You can call and leave a message on our dedicated voicemail line at 971-339-8868 or send us an email to talkingbeat@portlandoregon.gov. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. More episodes can be found at our website, portlandoregon.gov/police/podcast.